Dan Forest is running to be North Carolina's next lieutenant governor. We speak to him about the GOP primary and the issues important to his campaign next on North Carolina Now.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
We are inviting all the lieutenant gubernatorial candidates to come on the show to discuss their campaign and the issues. Dan Forest is a Republican candidate for lieutenant governor. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me today.
Okay, what should the voters out there know about Dan Forest for lieutenant governor?
Sure. Well, first, my background is not politics. I'm not a politician. I'm an architect. 23 years with the state's largest architecture firm. I was a senior partner and office president with that firm, and about 2 years ago I decided to leave that behind, leave behind the salary and the benefits and all the perks that go along with that to go serve the people of North Carolina. And about a year ago we jumped in the race for lieutenant governor. I live here in Raleigh, have 4 kids, and my wife Alice and I have been married for 20 years.
Why would you give up a career as a senior architect to be a politician?
Because I believe we have a leadership crisis in North Carolina. We have a leadership crisis in our country, and I believe that my gifts and abilities from architecture lend themselves well to politics. As architects, we are planners, we're visionaries, we're creative problem solvers, and I believe that's what we need more of in government, at all levels of government, but especially now. I think I was sitting around and watching the direction of our state and watching the direction of our country and not liking where it was going, and decided, I can't sit on the sidelines and complain about it anymore. I need to jump in and do something about it. And I never wanted my kids to come to me and say, "Dad, where were you when all this was going down?" And so we decided to leave that behind for a period, to make a sacrifice for our country and jump in the race.
Now, when you say all of this was going down, that includes a 2010 very successful election for the Republicans in the state of North Carolina. Are you calling them out as well for the way they've led this past legislative session?
No, I think they've done a fantastic job leading. Listen, I'm a conservative Republican, and I believe they've done a great job leading. I think Tom Tillis and Phil Berger have been outstanding leaders in the General Assembly. And I think that they're doing a great job crafting the kind of legislation that my party believes in, that the people that I'm talking to every day believe in. And really, we don't have a legislative crisis in North Carolina. We have a leadership crisis, and that's why I'm running for lieutenant governor, to fill a spot on the leadership team.
You say you've got a three-legged platform that you're running on: jobs, education, and illegal immigration. Put that 1, 2, 3. Is it number 1 jobs, number 2 education, number 3 illegal immigration?
Well, I think if you're talking to the people of North Carolina on the conservative side of the aisle, you're going to find that illegal immigration rises to the top. I do a presentation that I talk about these issues just about every single night, give them equal time between education, job creation, and immigration, and the questions are always about illegal immigration. But we lift jobs up. We believe that really jobs are incredibly important to the state. We have 17.6% unemployment at the U6 level, and that's unsustainable for our state. You don't have to drive very far down the road past Kinston or anywhere else to realize that could be 30% or higher in many of our rural communities. So we have, in North Carolina, for instance, we're 44th in the nation in business tax climate. We have not laid a good, solid foundation for jobs in North Carolina, and we need to do that. And I believe we should eliminate the corporate income tax rate, cut it to 4% immediately, and then take it down to 0. Get that pressure off companies, allow them to hire workers, allow them to innovate, allow them to jumpstart the economy, especially at the small business side.
You've said this, that you're running so you can recruit businesses to North Carolina, and you want to do it without resorting to corporate welfare and government handouts.
That's right.
Define government handout, define corporate welfare, and when you talk about recruiting industry.
For years now, we've been trying to play the corporate incentives game, competing with states all over the Southeast, but when you realize that we're really not playing the same game. As I mentioned, if we're 44th in the nation in business tax climate, we're not on the same level. We have the highest corporate income tax rate in the Southeast. We have the highest gas tax rate in the Southeast. We have one of the highest personal income tax rates in the nation. We're not playing on the same field when we go out and try to give corporate incentives to companies to try to come to our state. I believe we should level that playing field for all businesses in North Carolina. Our small businesses hire 90% of our employees in the nation. We need to level that playing field for all businesses. I think any company that's been in North Carolina for 100 years would love to have the same incentives that some new companies having from coming in from New York or Chicago, wherever they come from. Not knocking new companies coming, we still need to recruit them, but we need to get the foundation right first from a business tax climate standpoint, and then we can start having other conversations.
And you're calling for a 0% state corporate income tax
That's right.
rate?
That's right.
Let's go to the personal income tax rate. What do you feel is a good, I guess, top personal, that's where you argue, that's where the debate is, of the top rates. Yeah. Where should they be?
I really don't know. I think that that's a whole dialogue that's going to have to happen around an entire tax structure that needs to be very transparent and fair across the board. I think that first and foremost you need to have fair and transparent taxation. Right now in our country, 49% of Americans don't pay any income tax. 50% of our country is not paying anything into being American. At the state level, we have the same issue. We need to make sure that across the board taxation is transparent. So whether that's through personal income tax, whether that's through a sales tax, whatever the tax system happens to be, I think it should be fair and transparent for all North Carolinians.
So you want to look at the whole picture of taxation.
That's right, absolutely.
And are you open to broad reform? What would be
Sure.
fundamental reforms?
Absolutely.
Are you a flat tax fan?
I am a flat tax fan.
Fair
yeah.
tax fan?
Fair tax fan, yeah, absolutely.
Progressive income tax?
Not so much, no.
Okay.
And the fair and flat tax can also be progressive in nature too if you allow them to be. I think the onus really has to be on government to put controls on themselves to not be able to raise taxes at a whim. We need to make sure that there is some control as to when those taxes are raised and how that happens.
It's one thing to run on such fundamental reforms, another thing to convince two chambers to go along with it in such a way.
Yeah.
What's realistic?
Well, realistic from a lieutenant governor's standpoint, you sit on the state economic development board. So that's realistic where you have the influence. You also have the influence from a bully pulpit. You have a loud voice. You have the leadership is influence. I mean, that's how I would define it, is the ability to work with the Senate, to be able to work with the House, and to be able to influence your colleagues to move in a certain direction. Obviously, you would, if we have a Republican lieutenant governor and I get elected as a Republican governor rather, and I get elected as a Republican lieutenant governor, then you would take on some of the policies of that governor as well, become somewhat of a surrogate for that governor to go out and to help push certain legislation within both houses. Lieutenant governor is the only position in North Carolina that's both legislative and executive at the same time. So you, on a full-time basis, you're working with the legislators, the president of the Senate, and on a full-time basis, you're also working with the executive team.
Do large businesses like North Carolina's climate right now?
Well, I think if you look at certain ratings, you look at, for instance, the Forbes rating, you say that North Carolina is #1 for business. Why is that? Well, we have low cost of living in North Carolina. We have abundant jobs. That's because we have high unemployment. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it would attract business to North Carolina. We have a great climate. People want to come to North Carolina. People are moving into our state all the time. A great geography from the mountains to the coast. All those things are very beneficial. Great university system, professional sports teams. But if you're looking at kind of an emotional decision about why you come to a state where you want to be in the short term versus the long term, we haven't, again, laid the long-term foundation from a business tax standpoint in our state to attract those kinds of businesses. So I think that's where we have to start.
If you're a small business person, let's say less than 100 employees, what are you thinking of the North Carolina business climate?
Well, I think that, from a regulation standpoint, if you're just looking at coming into North Carolina, depending on your industry, regulation-wise, we're a pretty good state. We're ranked #1 in the nation for having low regulations as a state. Federal regulations are often a burden, depending on where you are. The heavy burden for federal regulations down at the coast in the fishing industry and so forth. But I think from a regulatory standpoint, it's probably not a bad place to come and start a business. But again, you're dealing with the exact same tax basis that what we're talking about for large companies. It's still the same issue that they're fighting.
You think taxes, the way they're structured in North Carolina, need such changing that it offsets all the other benefits that you say that are out there for North Carolina's business climate?
Oh, I wouldn't say it offsets all of them, but certainly fundamentally, we have to get the foundation right. What we do is our leaders are going out playing the incentive game, saying we want you to come to our state and we're going to give you $20, $30 million to bring X number of jobs to our state over a 10-year period, whatever it happens to be. So they're making up the rules on the fly. What we need to do is make sure the rules are level and they're fair for all North Carolina companies. They're fair for all companies coming to our state, and they know what rules they're playing by. We don't have to make them up on the fly. And I think that's where we begin.
You were on the record as well talking about the gasoline tax on every gallon of gasoline. You want a gas tax reduction?
Yeah.
You're on the record.
Yeah.
Gas tax reduction, do you mean let's cap it at a certain level and let it sit there, or do you mean a tangible reduction beneath what it may sit at currently and is poised to rise?
No, I think a tangible reduction to be competitive with our southeast neighbors. We have the highest gas tax rate in the southeast. I think we need to bring the gas tax rate down over time. This doesn't happen in one day, it doesn't happen in one session, but over a period of years, we bring that gas tax down to be competitive with the states that are surrounding us.
They're going to say that gas tax, that's what put asphalt on the roads all over this state. We've been the good road state for decades. You say you want good roads. Do you offset the funding if you lose revenue through the gas tax? Do you not lose revenue if you cut the gas tax? How does it play out?
I think you're right. Both of those things come into play. I think revenue would increase with lowering the gas tax because our citizens that live on the border of North Carolina would stop traveling into Virginia and South Carolina to fill up. People would stop passing through North Carolina and filling up in Virginia or South Carolina as they pass through our state because they know we have the highest gas prices in the southeast. So you would see some part of that revenue increase. As it relates to the revenue decrease, again, over time, you're not talking about one night turning the light switch off. The funding has been there historically. Had we not robbed from the highway fund and the highway trust fund over a period of decades, John Locke did a study that said we would have plenty of money in the bank right now to pay for all of our new roads, all road repairs, all bridge repairs, and so forth. So really what happens is you put a tax in place, and then the legislators decide that they want that money to go somewhere else, and they move it to another place. So there's money, there's revenue available in other places that can be shifted into the things that government should be doing, and infrastructure is one of the foundational elements of government. We should be providing money for roads and to take care of our bridges and so forth.
What do you make of the current Republican leadership not addressing the gas tax? It's bubbled up in recent months, but as we sit here ahead of the 2012 short session, what do you think of them not addressing it, like some have called for them to do?
Well, I know that the House did address it. The House brought it up and passed it on the floor and said they wanted to be addressed. The Senate then left and went home and said we didn't want to address it. My understanding is, and I don't know how accurate this is that some of the projects were already underway that was using that increase in the gas tax, and so therefore it couldn't be backed down because those projects that were already underway would have to be halted. So again, if that's the case, then we're spending money that we don't have in government, and we have to stop doing that.
You're on the record saying North Carolina needs more business leaders in office, not more politicians in office.
Yeah.
How do you define a business leader who holds an elected office versus someone who might be a business leader, but you would consider them a politician?
Well, I think that one of the things that happens in politics is that you get institutionalized pretty quickly. You become part of the problem at times by understanding all the reasons something can't be done within government circles. I think that we need fresh people coming from the business world that are courageous and they're bold in their leadership style. They're willing to take on difficult problems in our state and not worry about going back the next year. When you become institutionalized, all of a sudden you're worried about your next election, you're worried about what happens 2 years or 4 years down the road, and quite frankly, I love architecture, I love the business world. I can serve and go back to work without hesitation.
I was going to ask you, how do you keep that from happening to you? If you become lieutenant governor, the obvious next step is going to be a run for governor.
Possibly.
It seems to be. Who's going to back you on that and hold you accountable in your personal life to say, Dan, it's time to get out, or run on your principles, win or lose?
Well, I hope that would be my wife first, but I think that all people in politics need to be surrounded by trusted advisors. Trusted advisors from my perspective that have, one, a biblical worldview about how they lead. That's important to me, and I would want people looking into my life and saying, it's time to move on, it's time to go back to work, it's time to go back to your family, whatever it happens to be. There's nothing that's glamorous about this lifestyle. I mean, you know this, you cover it every day. There's nothing glamorous about the sacrifice that people have to make and so forth. So I think that you have to know when your time has come, when you've run the course. And I think as long as people are still serving the people well, they're not serving themselves, they're not serving their self-interests in politics, then they should keep on serving. But as soon as that turns, then it's time to leave. You
mentioned your worldview in that answer. It's a question I wanted to ask you. It's many candidates run in the Republican side, conservative side, as fiscal and social conservatives, but the campaigns often end up defining each other as either or. Which drives your heart as you leave the private sector trying to become lieutenant governor? Are you a fiscal conservative, or does your heart lead you more towards fighting the social cause?
Yes, I think the answer is both. I really don't draw a line between them. They're both incredibly important. If we weren't sitting in a time, probably one of the most challenging economic times in our country's history, maybe I could drift over to the social side and say that was more important. But right now, they're both equally important. I think that we have this jobs or unemployment issue that's massive in North Carolina, this unfunded liability issue, the spending challenge that we have, taxation challenge that we have, and at the same time, We have the breakdown of the American family, which ends up leading to all kinds of challenges within our culture. So all those things are important. It's all of the above.
The ultimate kitchen table issue is education. So many kids are in public education. I saw you on camera saying that you can tell how a lieutenant...
Thanks for watching my videos.
Well, yeah, it's homework. But I'll tell you, Mr. Forrest, you say you can look at how a lieutenant governor and a governor care about your family by how they treat your kids in the education system. The Democrats are making this a cornerstone of their campaign against guys like you to say Republicans are hurting public education. Size up what the Democrats are doing, size up what the Republican leaders are doing as you see it. Which is it?
Well, their premise is completely wrong. I mean, ad hominem attacks are not worthy anymore. You shouldn't even be covering ad hominem attacks. We should get to the real core of the issues. The reality is that North Carolina is ranked 41st in the nation in K-12 education. We've had multiple education governors and lieutenant governors, in fact, all of them, over the past half century. I think it's time for us as citizens to look and say, you know what? Their policies have failed our children. They failed. They failed our children's future. You can't be 41st in the nation for decade after decade and say that what we're doing in public education is right. We need to reform education, drastically reform it. And so if the Democrats look into what we're saying and say that we're anti-education or anti-kids, look at their own policies over a century of time and say, what have they done for education? I think that's where we start. We need to, in my mind, we need to break the state government-controlled education monopoly and introduce choice. Put the power of education back in the hands of the parents, back in the hands of the teachers, and back in the hands of local communities. Get it out of the bureaucracy in Raleigh, get it out of the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., and allow the choices to be made at the local level.
What do you do with the bureaucracy in Raleigh, which would be the State Department of Education?
You make it more efficient and more nimble. We need, it's not that we don't need the Department of Public Instruction in Raleigh. We need a more efficient 21st century version of the Department of Public Instruction in Raleigh. We need to begin to look at reforms such as real competitive virtual education in North Carolina. We have virtual education, but we're just dabbling in it right now. We're not really doing it. Our children should be able to learn from the best and brightest professors, teachers from around the world in real time, anywhere they happen to be, and that's not happening right now. That will save money. That will improve education quality across the board. We need to look at vocational training again, possibly reforming the name so it has a new 21st century perspective, but we really need vocational training again. Not all students are cut out for four-year colleges. Not all students are cut out for science, technology, math, engineering curriculum anymore. We need to make sure that we're creating a curriculum that creates jobs for our students when they graduate high school, and then creating a curriculum that creates jobs for our students when they leave college.
You're saying there's a state monopoly on public education. They just lifted the state's charter school cap. Did that break the monopoly?
Well, it's a start. It doesn't really break the monopoly. The state's still in control. We see fights going on all over the state as to who controls funding and how much funding somebody gets. If you put the funding control back in the hands of the parents through a voucher system, allow them to go and choose the education choice that they think is best for their child, then you're going to see that monopoly broken all of a sudden. And what that does is in the business world, when you break a monopoly, you get increased competition, you get increased quality, costs are driven down, and most importantly, you get innovation. We haven't innovated in education in North Carolina 100 years because bureaucracy and innovation are at opposite ends of the spectrum. And so that monopoly being broken will raise all ships. That's a tide that raises all ships across the board.
With innovation requires experimentation.
Yeah.
Under your
Sure.
vision, it has to, and not every experiment's going to be successful. So what do you say to the parents who, if you say trust us, we'll transition to a better educational model, how do you alleviate those fears that in their county those local educators aren't going to mess things up and hurt the kid trying to innovate?
Well, it can't get any worse. What are we going to hurt? We're 41st in the nation. Yeah, some places, some polls say we're 49th in the nation. I'm being conservative and say 41st. So it's not going to hurt anything. What are we going to do? We're going to keep doing the same thing that we've done for the last half century and keep saying we're successful at 41st? No, we're going to have to innovate. We're going to look to other counties. One county will do something right, or one school will do something right. The rest of them will look at that and say that's the path we need to follow because these kids are prepared to go out and go to college and get jobs. Right now, some 60% of our kids that go on to college, whether it's a community college or university system, are in remedial reading or remedial math classes. We are not graduating kids proficient to go on into their life. That is not acceptable in my mind.
Illegal immigration, you say, is the third leg of your
Sure.
plank after jobs and education. You want to be the point person for fighting illegal immigration in North Carolina. What does that role look like?
Well, here's another statistic. We're 42nd in the nation in illegal immigration. Only 8 states have a worse problem than us. We have somewhere between 600,000 and 1.2 million illegal aliens in our state. Why don't we know? Because we can't ask the question.
Folks are hiring them.
Of course folks are hiring them, yeah. They sure are, because they're trying to be competitive with the other folks that are hiring them. So we need to implement E-Verify. For all employers, not just, I know we had an E-Verify bill that went through, but for all employers, not just those with 25 employees or more.
You see a real problem with them with small companies with less than 25 employees.
Yeah, sure, small business. I mean, small business hires most people in our state. And so in the states that are fighting it, Alabama, for instance, who just passed tough reforms this past legislative period, have seen their unemployment is dropping as their reforms are taking place in their state. So it does impact unemployment. So E-Verify, certainly we have a criminal element on the street. We know that some 80% of gang members in America are illegal aliens. That's a big problem. We need to deal with that problem right away. Implement 287G program in all the county jails across the state. Right now there's only 6 jails in North Carolina that have 287G, and that just says if somebody's caught committing criminal activity, they're intaked into the jail, and once they're intaked in the jail, they're found out to be illegal. At that point, they serve their time and get deported. We need to remove the criminal element, make North Carolina safe for our people. And we also need to pass voter ID. 80% of Americans believe that, or North Carolinians rather, believe that that's a good thing, and our governor vetoed that. Why is that? Because it's a game changer for Democrat politics in North Carolina. We need to make sure that we protect our election process, make sure that those people that are going to the polls are who they say that they are. We need to mandate English as the official language of North Carolina. People all over the state believe that's the case. We need to make sure that our government says that English is our official language. All our documents and forms are in English and not in Spanish, not in Arabic, not in other world languages.
Dan Forrest is running in the GOP primary for Lieutenant Governor in North Carolina. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching this special episode of North Carolina Now, where we will be inviting other lieutenant gubernatorial candidates to share the stage with us. Thank you so much for watching.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.